My name is Stephanie Martinez, and I want to tell you about my research, Strengthening Instruction, a qualitative single case study identifying the professional development needs of long-term substitutes in Arizona K-8 charter schools. This research all started with my problem statement. Long-term substitutes are the teachers of record in 25% of charter school classrooms nationwide, yet most lack the necessary knowledge and skills to implement the instructional best practices crucial for student academic success. My literature review is organized into 4 sections. First, I examined the responsibilities and credentials of long-term substitutes. Many enter classrooms with minimal preparation, and international studies show long-term substitutes want stronger integration into the school community and access to professional development. Yet little evidence suggests these needs are being met, even though such support could improve retention and reduce turnover. Second, I reviewed the characteristics of charter schools. Charter schools differ from traditional public schools in structure, union management, and staffing flexibility, allowing principals to hire uncertified teachers. This flexibility increases reliance on long-term substitutes. Third, I examined the teacher education programs. Both traditional and alternative pathways have aimed to build knowledge in pedagogy, content, and pedagogical content. Traditional routes emphasize coursework and fieldwork, while alternative programs offer accelerated entry and appeal to career changers. These programs are what long-term substitutes have not been a part of. Finally, I reviewed the professional development. Professional learning communities foster collaboration and belonging, while mentoring and instructional coaching provide individualized support and feedback. These approaches can serve as effective alternatives for long-term substitutes who lack formal teacher education, helping them build their skills needed for student success. Together, these 4 strands of literature provided a background as to the situation of long-term substitutes in the charter school world. The purpose of this qualitative single case study was to identify the professional development needs of long-term substitute teachers in Arizona K-8 charter schools. To guide this study, I examined 2 research questions. The first research question asks, how do long-term substitutes perceive their professional development needs in relation to the categories of teacher knowledge? The second research question asks, how does the teaching of long-term substitutes demonstrate the need for professional development in the categories of teacher knowledge? These questions provided the framework for analyzing both the self-reported perceptions of long-term substitutes and the instructional practices observed in classrooms. Lee Schulman's 1987 framework describes the knowledge base that effective teachers draw on. There are 7 categories to this framework. First, general pedagogical knowledge, which consists of classroom management strategies. Second, subject matter content knowledge, which encompasses the knowledge the teacher has of the subject they are teaching. Third, pedagogical content knowledge refers to the topic-specific strategies, representations, and anticipated misconceptions that make ideas learnable. Fourth, curriculum knowledge includes the sequencing of content and utilizing a pre-made curriculum. Fifth, the knowledge of learners includes students' backgrounds, development, motivation, and prior knowledge. Sixth, knowledge of educational context includes how the classroom and the school function, as well as policy environments in which teaching occurs. And finally, knowledge of educational philosophy, which includes educational theory and ethics. Together, these categories describe the knowledge teachers need to make instructional decisions. This framework provided the lens I used in identifying professional development needs. This study was designed as a single qualitative case study in order to closely examine the experiences of long-term substitutes in a specific educational setting. A case study approach was appropriate because it allowed me to gather rich, descriptive data and analyze how perceptions, practices, and needs come together in a real-world context. The single case study in this study was the Arizona Desert Charter Schools, a pseudonym, a network of K-8 charter schools. The participants were 6 long-term substitutes working within the network. 3 of them taught core content areas such as math, English language arts, social studies, and science. 2 taught electives, mostly in STEM subjects, and 1 served as a co-teacher in a core content classroom. Their teaching experience ranged from 1 year to 18 years. This range of assignments and experience levels provided a diverse perspective on how professional development needs differ depending on role and background. Data collection involved 3 methods. First, I conducted semi-structured interviews. Each participant completed 3 interviews. The initial interview focused on their prior experiences with professional development. The follow-up interviews were held after classroom observations and allowed me to ask questions about their instructional decision-making and thought processes during the lesson observed. Second, I carried out classroom observations. Each participant was observed twice. These observations gave me insight into how long-term substitutes taught their lessons and demonstrated areas of strength as well as areas of need within Schulman's categories of teacher knowledge. Third, I reviewed lesson plan documents connected to the lessons I observed. These documents provided further evidence of how participants planned instruction, aligned to standards, and selected strategies for student learning. Using interviews, observations, and document review allowed me to triangulate the data and strengthen the credibility of the findings. Together, the design, the site, the participant group, and the data collection process create a thorough approach to identifying the professional development needs of long-term substitutes working in charter schools. My findings are organized around Schulman's teacher knowledge framework using the categories of curriculum knowledge, general pedagogical knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, subject matter content knowledge, and knowledge of learners. The codes for curriculum knowledge had the greatest frequency. The theme that emerged from the findings was that the participants engaged with their curriculum at varying levels of confidence, with some demonstrating strong familiarity and others navigating limited guidance on how to use the curriculum. This variation highlights the need for structured curriculum orientation and ongoing support. The codes of classroom management proactive, classroom management reactive, and classroom routines are aligned with the category of general pedagogical knowledge. The theme that emerged from these codes was that the participants implemented classroom routines and management strategies with varying consistency, with some demonstrating effectiveness and others reporting challenges with student behavior. This inconsistency suggests that long-term substitutes may benefit from targeted professional development focused on proactive classroom management strategies and building predictable classroom environments. The codes of check for understanding, differentiation, misconceptions, student-peer collaboration, and subject-specific routines all fell in the category of pedagogical content knowledge. The theme that emerged with these codes was that the participants anticipated some student misconceptions. However, some participants struggled with recognizing misconceptions after the post-lesson reflections. This indicates that professional development in real-time recognition of student understanding would be beneficial for long-term substitutes. The codes demonstrated subject knowledge, helped students make connections, and lesson planning knowledge all fell in the category of subject matter content knowledge. The theme that emerged was that the participants demonstrated varying subject knowledge, with some participants effectively supporting student learning or struggling to understand the purpose of state standards and lesson objectives. The theme here highlights the importance of strengthening both content knowledge and curricular alignment to ensure substitutes can provide rigorous instruction. The codes lesson rigor, meeting students' needs, student academic support, and student data were part of the knowledge of learners category. The theme that emerged was that participants made efforts to support students academically, but struggled to gather and use student data to plan appropriate, rigorous, and responsive instruction. Although participants showed effort and care, they rarely used data systematically, indicating a need for professional development focused on the knowledge of learners. Finally, it is important to note that the categories of knowledge of educational context and knowledge of educational philosophy, there were no reportable findings. Participants articulated limited experiences that aligned with these categories. This absence underscores a potential gap in long-term substitutes' broader professional preparation. Overall, long-term substitutes showed partial knowledge with gaps in curriculum, management, misconceptions, standards, and data use, highlighting the need for targeted professional development to improve teaching and learning. When integrating my findings with the literature, several connections emerged. First, regarding long-term substitutes, roles, and skills, 5 of the 6 participants in my study reported access to professional development. This contrasts with international research by Uchida and colleagues, which found that only 19% of long-term substitutes had such access. The literature also emphasizes the value of professional development in strengthening substitutes practice, aligning with my participants' experiences. Second, under teacher education programs, all 6 participants expressed a need for more practical skills, echoing Evans et al., who found that teacher preparation provides essential pedagogy and content knowledge. Additionally, 4 participants identified student misconceptions, similar to pre-service teacher in Schulten et al.'s research, who also showed that they struggled in recognizing misconceptions. Finally, the section on professional development strongly connects to the findings. 3 participants participated in professional learning communities, consistent with Park and Bione's findings that PLCs foster collaboration. 2 participants demonstrated subject-specific routines, which reflect Hanno's work on the value of instructional coaches modeling instructional practices. Overall, the integration highlights that while some long-term substitutes in this case had access to meaningful professional learning, their needs and challenges mirror what broader research has documented. These findings point to important implications and recommendations for educational leaders, principals, and instructional coaches. For educational and charter management organization leaders, the implication is the need for targeted professional development beyond just curriculum integration and classroom management strategies. To address this, I recommend expanding professional development opportunities beyond these topics to include other categories of teacher knowledge. Leaders should also revise policy so that long-term substitutes are consistently included in professional development alongside certified teachers. For charter school principals, the implication is the recognition and addressing of the diversity of skills to better meet long-term substitutes' needs. Principals must assess these current skill levels in order to provide the right support. Based on this, I recommend that principals update their local professional development frameworks to ensure coverage of all categories of teacher knowledge. Finally, for instructional coaches, the implication is to acknowledge that substitutes may have instructional needs that differ from certified teachers. To address this, I recommend involving instructional coaches in the redesign of professional development frameworks. Coaches can model effective strategies to help long-term substitutes build their skills. I also recommend that professional development include topics for all teachers, not only those in core content areas, but those in electives and co-teaching roles. Taken together, these recommendations emphasize the importance of intentional support structures that fully integrate long-term substitutes into professional learning. There are several limitations to this study. First, the participants may have had limited exposure to the full range of Schulman's categories of teacher knowledge. While I worked to ask questions in language they were familiar with, there could have been misunderstandings of what was being asked during the interviews. Second, my position at the education management organization may have influenced how participants responded during the semi-structured interviews, as they could have tailored their answers based on my role. Finally, as with any qualitative study, there is the possibility of bias in data collection, analysis, and interpretation. While I took steps to minimize this through triangulation, member checking, and keeping a reflective journal, it is important to acknowledge these potential influences on the study's outcomes. My distribution plan focuses on sharing these findings with both local and national audiences. Locally, I will present to Arizona Desert Charter Schools leaders and instructional coaches, since they are in the best position to implement targeted professional development for long-term substitutes. Nationally, I plan to share the results at the National Charter School Conference, where leaders and policymakers can consider broader implications for charter school staffing and training. In addition, I will present at the Teaching, Leading, and Coaching Conference, which brings together instructional coaches and educators committed to improving classroom practice. These venues will allow the findings to reach stakeholders who can use them to improve support structures for long-term substitutes. When we equip long-term substitutes with the tools and support they need, we not only empower them as educators, but also ensure that every student, regardless of circumstance, receives the high-quality learning they deserve.